After 15 years with the FBI Tactical Unit, I had seen enough darkness to last several lifetimes. My retirement came earlier than planned, but necessary. The bullet that found its way into my shoulder during our last operation in Bogotá had healed, but something in me needed more repair than physical therapy could provide. My daughter Emma needed stability. Her spinal condition had progressed over the past 2 years, and the doctors agreed that a permanent move away from the constant relocations of my FBI career would benefit her development. Maple Creek Estates appeared perfect on paper. Good schools, low crime rates, and most importantly, single-level homes that could accommodate Emma's mobility needs. The real estate agent mentioned an active HOA but assured me they were reasonable. They keep property values high, she explained as we toured the corner house with the large bay windows where Emma could watch the neighborhood children play. Nothing too strict. The late summer sun painted golden streaks across our new living room as the movers brought in the last of our boxes. Emma maneuvered her wheelchair across the hardwood floors, her smile wider than I had seen in months. "It feels like home already, Dad," she said, testing the turning radius in the kitchen. I had requested specific modifications for wider doorways before moving in, and the previous owners had been accommodating. Our neighbors to the right, the Williamses, brought over a homemade lasagna that first evening. To the left, Mr. Fernandez helped me unpack my tool chest and offered advice about the best local mechanics. The street had a rhythm to it: morning joggers, afternoon kids on bikes, evening dog walkers. For the first time in years, I felt my shoulders relax. No more looking over them, assessing threats, planning extraction routes. This was normal. This was civilian life. The wheelchair ramp was a necessity, not a choice. Emma needed independent access to our front door, and the 3 steps prevented that. I designed it myself, using treated lumber that matched our house trim, keeping the angle gentle enough for her to navigate safely but steep enough to fit within our small front yard. It took a weekend to build, and Emma christened it with a ribbon-cutting ceremony that made us both laugh. 3 days later, a shadow fell across our breakfast table. Through the window, I spotted a woman in a crisp blue suit examining our ramp with a measuring tape. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face into a permanent expression of disapproval. When she rang the doorbell, I answered with the pleasant smile I had been practicing since moving to suburbia. "Good morning, I am Barbara Winters, president of the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association." She did not offer her hand. Instead, she extended a business card between 2 manicured fingers. "I notice you have constructed an exterior modification without prior approval." I explained about Emma, gesturing toward the living room where she was reading. "The ramp is essential for her mobility." Barbara's eyes flickered toward Emma, then back to me without softening. "All exterior modifications require prior board approval. Section 7, paragraph 3 of your HOA agreement clearly states this." She produced a small handbook from her designer purse. "You will need to submit a formal application, including architectural drawings and material specifications." That evening, a white envelope appeared in our mailbox. Inside was a formal warning notice citing violation of community standards and a $150 fine. I decided diplomatic channels would be best. After all, I had negotiated with drug lords and terrorist cells. How difficult could one HOA president be? The HOA application form for my already built wheelchair ramp ran 17 pages long. I completed it with the same attention to detail I once gave to mission plans, including professional-grade diagrams and material specifications. Emma watched me work at the kitchen table, her brown eyes curious. "Will they make us take it down, Dad?" she asked, her voice small. The ramp had already given her a new sense of independence she treasured. "No, sweetheart, they just need to make sure everything is up to code," I assured her, though something in my gut told me this would not be simple. I hand-delivered the application to the HOA office the next day. The receptionist, a young woman named Melissa, looked apologetically at the stack of papers I placed on her desk. "Barbara is very particular about these things," she whispered, glancing toward the closed office door behind her, "especially with new residents." While waiting for the board decision, I met James Okada, whose Japanese maple tree had been forcibly removed after Barbara deemed it non-standard vegetation. The elderly couple across the street, the Cohens, mentioned their bird feeder had resulted in a $300 fine for attracting nuisance wildly. Each story carried the same undertone: quiet compliance or escalating consequences. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a room decorated with framed photographs of pristine yards and award-winning garden displays. Approximately 30 residents occupied the folding chairs arranged in neat rows. I positioned Emma's wheelchair at the end of the back row, giving her a clear exit path if needed. Barbara called the meeting to order with 3 sharp taps of her gavel. Her voice carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Property values are the lifeblood of our community," she began, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation of rising home prices in the area. "Maintaining aesthetic standards is non-negotiable." When my application appeared on the screen, Barbara's tone shifted. "We have a request for a permanent wooden ramp structure at 1472 Willow Lane." The image of our home appeared, with the ramp circled in red as if indicating a tumor. "The board has concerns about the precedent this sets for structural modifications visible from the street." I stood, keeping my voice measured. "The ramp is necessary for my daughter's disability accommodation. The Americans with Disabilities Act provides clear guidance on reasonable modifications." Barbara's smile tightened. "This is not a matter of legality, Mr. Evans, but of community standards. Perhaps you should consider a portable ramp that can be stored out of sight when not in use." "My daughter needs access to our home at all times," I responded, feeling heat rise in my neck. "A portable ramp would require assistance every time she enters or exits." Barbara glanced at Emma, then back to me. "We all make sacrifices for property values, Mr. Evans. Your request will be taken under advisement." The following week, our mailbox contained 3 separate violation notices. One for the ramp, another for Emma's therapy equipment visible through our garage window, and a third for unauthorized landscaping, referring to the wheelchair-accessible garden bed I had built in the backyard. Each carried increasing fines. Our neighbor James approached me while I was checking the mail. "She does this," he said quietly. "Finds something about residents she does not like and makes their lives difficult until they either conform or leave. The Patels moved out last year after she kept citing their cooking smells as a nuisance." That evening I noticed a car driving slowly past our house. The driver was Barbara, her phone held up to the window, clearly photographing our property. The next day, another envelope arrived with printed photos of our home from multiple angles, each violation circled in red marker. Emma began asking if we could close the curtains when she practiced her physical therapy exercises. "I feel like someone is always watching," she explained, her normally bright expression clouded. The sense of peace we had found in Maple Creek was evaporating. I installed small security cameras at discrete points around our property, a habit from my previous life I never thought would be necessary here. The footage revealed Barbara walking the perimeter of our property line at odd hours, measuring distances from our fence to the property line, examining the wheelchair ramp with her phone camera. Our home, meant to be our sanctuary, was becoming a target, and the woman leading the charge had no idea who she was dealing with. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Its official tone left no room for interpretation. "Final notice of violation. Removal of unauthorized structures required within 72 hours or legal action will commence." I placed it on the counter, feeling the familiar calm that always preceded my most dangerous missions. This was no longer about bureaucratic harassment. This was a direct threat to my daughter's independence. Emma noticed the change in my demeanor immediately. Her 13 years had made her perceptive to the subtle shifts in my body language that most adults would miss. "What is it, Dad?" she asked, wheeling herself into the kitchen after finishing her online classes. "Just some HOA paperwork," I replied, forcing a smile. But Emma had inherited my inability to accept comforting lies. "It is about the ramp, is not it?" she asked, her hands gripping her wheelchair armrests tighter. "Barbara looked at me yesterday when I was coming home from physical therapy. She shook her head like I was doing something wrong just by entering our house." That night Emma had trouble sleeping. The security and confidence she had been building in our new home was eroding. I heard her wheelchair moving around her room at 2 a.m. and found her looking out her window at the street. "I keep thinking someone is out there," she confessed. The next morning, Emma's wheelchair would not power on. The charging station showed a green light indicating a full charge, but the chair remained unresponsive. I examined connections and found subtle tool marks on the charging port. Someone had tampered with it. I replaced the damaged components from the spare parts kit the manufacturer had provided, but a cold knot formed in my stomach. That afternoon, I installed additional security cameras, the kind we used for covert operations. These were not the visible deterrent cameras mounted on the eaves, but pinhole lenses hidden in inconspicuous objects, a bird feeder outside the garage, a fake smoke detector inside, a garden ornament with line of sight to the wheelchair ramp. I positioned them to create overlapping fields of view with no blind spots. If anyone approached our property with ill intent, I would have them on multiple cameras. "You seem worried, Dad," Emma said as she watched me testing the camera feeds on my laptop. "Just being careful, sweetheart. Remember how I always say that preparation prevents problems." I kept my voice light, but my mind was already running through scenarios, calculating threats and responses. 3 nights later, the silent alarm on my phone activated at 4:37 a.m. Someone was in our garage. I slipped out of bed and moved silently to my security setup. The night vision feed showed a figure hunched over Emma's wheelchair, which we kept in the garage for charging overnight. My blood ran cold as I recognized Barbara's profile, her movements precise and deliberate as she manipulated something near the wheel assembly. I recorded the footage, fighting every instinct to confront her immediately. Barbara spent 11 minutes with the wheelchair before carefully exiting through the side door she had somehow accessed. I waited until she was gone, then went to examine what she had done. The brake lines had been partially cut, not enough to fail immediately, but enough to rupture under pressure. The sabotage was sophisticated, designed to appear as mechanical failure rather than deliberate tampering. Had I not been specifically looking for it, I might have missed it. I repaired the damage immediately, then spent the remainder of the night reviewing the security footage from previous days. Barbara had attempted to access our garage twice before but had been deterred by the automatic light. I did not tell Emma what had happened. Instead, I gave her a different wheelchair to use that morning, claiming hers needed routine maintenance. I wanted to preserve evidence without alarming her. Her morning routine proceeded normally: breakfast, medication, preparation for her virtual school day. I waited until she was settled in her online class before stepping outside to inspect the driveway incline. What happened next occurred in mere seconds, but will replay in my nightmares forever. Emma had wheeled herself to the kitchen for a glass of water during her break. Not finding me inside, she spotted me through the window and decided to join me outside. She must have taken her regular wheelchair from the garage, not knowing about the sabotage or my repairs. I heard the garage door open and turned to see Emma emerging, waving cheerfully. The driveway sloped gently toward the street, giving her just enough momentum to roll forward. Her smile disappeared as she reached for the brake lever, expecting the familiar resistance that would slow her descent. Instead, the brake line ruptured completely under pressure. "Dad," the panic in her voice cut through me like a physical blow. I was already running, calculating that I could not reach her before she entered the street. Emma desperately tried to stop the wheelchair with her hands, but the momentum was too great. She veered toward the drainage ditch at the edge of our property, attempting to avoid the street traffic. The sound of metal impacting concrete echoed across the morning quiet as the wheelchair tipped over, throwing Emma onto the grass. I reached her in seconds, my training automatically assessing her for injuries while my heart pounded with a father's terror. "It would not stop," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I pulled the brake, but nothing happened. The emergency room doctor confirmed 2 broken fingers where they had caught in the wheel, a sprained wrist, and multiple contusions. She was lucky, he told me privately, if she had hit the street instead of turning toward the ditch. Emma lay in the hospital bed, smaller and more vulnerable than I had seen her in years. Her normally bright eyes were dull with pain medication and fear. "Why would the brakes just break like that?" she asked sleepily. I held her uninjured hand, rage and determination crystallizing into something cold and focused within me. "They did not break, sweetheart. They were broken, but I promise you it will never happen again." The hospital room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Emma's sleeping face as I made a call to my former FBI supervisor. "Jack, I need access to some databases, off the record." The time for playing by HOA rules had ended. Barbara Winters had just declared war on a child. She had no idea what kind of response she had just triggered. The hospital released Emma the following afternoon with a cast on her right arm, pain medication, and instructions for follow-up care. As I helped her into our car, I noticed Barbara's silver Mercedes driving slowly past the hospital entrance. Our eyes met briefly through her windshield. Her expression registered no remorse, only calculation. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, exhausted from pain and medication, I transformed our home office into what my FBI team had once called a war room. I covered one wall with corkboard, methodically pinning every HOA notice, every photograph of Barbara surveilling our property, printouts of the security footage showing her tampering with the wheelchair. I had spent 15 years hunting the worst criminals across international borders. Now I would apply those same skills domestically. The first phase was intelligence gathering. I accessed databases that ordinary citizens did not know existed, calling in favors from former colleagues who asked no questions when I explained the situation. Barbara Winters had a history that extended far beyond our HOA. 3 previous harassment complaints filed, then mysteriously withdrawn. A sealed court case involving another disabled resident in her former neighborhood. Financial irregularities at her previous accounting job that had been settled quietly out of court. Barbara Winters is not even her original name, my former tech specialist informed me over an encrypted line. She was Barbara Whittaker until 2017. The name change coincided with her move to your neighborhood after the settlement. I expanded my investigation to the other HOA board members. 2 were simply passive participants, rubber-stamping Barbara's decisions. The treasurer, however, appeared nervous in every meeting recording I reviewed. His signatures on financial documents showed hesitation marks, subtle indicators of duress that I had been trained to recognize during hostage negotiations. By day, I presented the calm face of a concerned father, taking Emma to follow-up medical appointments, assuring the doctors that the equipment malfunction was being addressed with the manufacturer. By night, I built my case with military precision, creating backup copies of all evidence, establishing timelines, documenting patterns of behavior that revealed Barbara's methodical targeting of residents who threatened her control. I reached out to former residents who had moved away after conflicts with Barbara. The Patels described months of increasing fines for invisible violations until they sold their home at a loss. An elderly widow tearfully recounted how Barbara had her emotional support animal declared a nuisance after she questioned HOA fee increases. Each story revealed the same pattern: identify, isolate, pressure, remove. One evening, James Okada knocked hesitantly on my door. "I saw what happened to Emma," he said quietly. "The wheelchair accident. I also saw Barbara's car driving away from your house that morning before dawn." He handed me a memory card. "My security camera caught it. I have not shown this to anyone else because..." His voice trailed off. "Because you are afraid of retaliation," I finished for him. James nodded, his expression a mixture of shame and resolve. "But what happened to your daughter crosses a line. Several of us have been documenting Barbara's behavior. We meet secretly. Perhaps it is time you joined us." The underground resistance against Barbara's reign met in Mr. Fernandez's soundproofed basement music room. 7 residents from different sections of the neighborhood, all victims of Barbara's targeted harassment. The Cohens brought financial records showing unexplained increases in administrative fees. Dr. Lena Patel, who had returned to visit her parents still living in the community, provided emails showing how Barbara had orchestrated complaints against her family's traditional cooking. She specifically targets minorities, families with special needs, and anyone who questions her authority, explained Melissa, the HOA office receptionist who risked her job to attend. There is a pattern, but everyone has been too afraid to connect the dots. I stood before the makeshift coalition, the calmest person in the room despite having the most personal reason for anger. What Barbara did to my daughter was not just HOA overreach. It was criminal assault. She tampered with medical equipment with the intent to cause harm. I explained my background without elaboration. I have the training to build a case that will not only remove her from power, but ensure she faces legal consequences. But I need your help. Together, we formulated a multi-layered strategy. The passive neighbors would document all interactions with Barbara going forward. Those with technical skills would secure electronic evidence of FI. Financial discrepancies. My role would be coordination and eventual confrontation, using my federal connections to ensure proper authorities were engaged. In my garage, I carefully rebuilt Emma's wheelchair with enhanced safety features and a hidden camera system. Each evening, I reviewed the day's intelligence while practicing the controlled breathing techniques that had kept me alive during high-risk operations. My rage had transformed into something more dangerous to Barbara's methodical patience. "You seem different lately, Dad," Emma observed one evening as I helped her with physical therapy for her injured wrist. "Like you used to be before we moved here." "More," she searched for the word. "Focused," I suggested. "Dangerous," she replied quietly, but in a good way, like the dad who always made me feel safe. Monday morning arrived with steel-gray clouds hanging low over Maple Creek Estates. I wore my charcoal suit, the one reserved for court appearances and congressional testimonies during my FBI years. Emma watched from the living room window as I loaded a briefcase into the car. "Will you be gone all day?" she asked, her cast-covered arm resting on her wheelchair. "Just a few hours," I promised. "Mrs. Wilson from next door will check on you. Remember what we practiced with the new safety features on your chair." My first stop was the police station, where I filed a formal criminal complaint for tampering with medical equipment, reckless endangerment, and assault. The detective recognized me from my credentials and gave the case his personal attention. "We will need to move carefully," he advised. "Mrs. Winters has connections with the mayor's office through her husband's construction company." "That is why I am pursuing multiple channels simultaneously," I explained, handing him an external drive containing selected security footage. "This is just one part of a coordinated response." By noon, I had filed complaints with the Department of Housing and Urban Development for disability discrimination, the State Attorney General's Office for Civil Rights Violations, and the FBI Field Office for potential federal charges related to the wheelchair tampering. At each office, I presented only the specific evidence relevant to their jurisdiction, building separate but interconnected cases. The recorder in my jacket pocket activated automatically when I entered the HOA office at precisely 2:00 p.m. Barbara looked up from her desk, her expression shifting quickly from annoyance to composure. "Mr. Evans, do you have an appointment?" "I believe we have urgent business to discuss regarding my daughter's accident," I replied, placing my briefcase on the chair across from her desk. Barbara's artificial smile remained fixed. "I heard about that unfortunate incident. Equipment malfunctions can be so dangerous. I trust she is recovering well." I removed the flash drive containing the security footage and placed it on her desk. "This is not about a malfunction, Mrs. Winters, or should I say, Mrs. Whitaker." The subtle widening of her eyes confirmed what my investigation had revealed. She believed her past was buried. "I do not know what you mean," she said, but her manicured fingers twitched slightly. "This drive contains footage of you entering my garage at 4:37 a.m. last Tuesday and tampering with my daughter's wheelchair brakes, the same wheelchair that failed and caused her injuries later that morning." My voice remained perfectly level. "I have already filed criminal charges. This copy is courtesy of my FBI training in proper evidence handling." Barbara's composure cracked, her voice rising sharply. "You cannot prove anything. I was responding to reports of a garage door left open, performing my duties as HOA president." "By cutting brake lines on medical equipment?" I asked quietly. "Interesting interpretation of HOA responsibilities." She stood abruptly, knocking over a pen holder. "This is slander. I will sue you for defamation. Do you know who my husband is in this community?" "I know exactly who Donald Winters is, including his company's history of building code violations and the 3 discrimination suits settled out of court." I remained seated, watching her unravel. "I also know about the financial irregularities in the HOA accounts that you have been concealing. The board meeting tonight should be quite enlightening." The emergency HOA meeting notice had been distributed that morning, citing urgent safety and financial concerns requiring immediate community attention. Barbara had tried to cancel it, but the HOA bylaws required only 3 board member signatures to call an emergency session, and the treasurer had been surprisingly eager to cooperate after our private conversation about his legal exposure. The community center was filled beyond capacity that evening. Word had spread quickly through the neighborhood channels. Barbara arrived late, her husband flanking her like a bodyguard. She attempted to take control of the podium, but the treasurer stepped forward first. "We are here to address serious allegations of misconduct," he began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "Financial records indicating misappropriation of HOA funds and documented harassment of residents." Barbara rushed forward. "This meeting is out of order. As president, you entered my property without permission and deliberately sabotaged medical equipment, causing injury to a disabled child," I stated clearly, my voice carrying through the room without needing to shout. The projector activated, showing the security footage on the wall behind the podium. The room fell silent as Barbara's actions played out in high definition. What followed was a dam breaking. James Okada described the systematic harassment of his family. The Cohens presented financial records showing unexplained transfers. Dr. Patel's parents recounted their experience of cultural discrimination. One by one, residents stood to share their stories, many speaking publicly for the first time after years of intimidation. Local news reporters, anonymously tipped about the meeting, captured Barbara's attempted rebuttal on camera. "These people are conspiring against me because I maintain standards. This so-called evidence has been manipulated by Mr. Evans, who clearly has a vendetta against proper community governance." The detective I had met that morning chose that moment to enter the community center, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. "Barbara Winters, we need you to come with us to answer questions regarding the tampering of medical equipment and assault charges filed this morning." As Barbara was escorted out, still protesting her innocence, I noticed the tension visibly draining from many residents' faces. Some were crying quietly, others embracing in relief. The HOA board members, minus Barbara, called an immediate vote to place her on administrative leave pending investigation. Outside in the parking lot, I watched from a distance as Barbara was allowed to make a phone call before being driven to the station. Her husband paced aggressively, shouting about lawsuits and connections. Neither of them noticed the unmarked federal vehicle documenting their reactions, nor the HUD investigator interviewing elderly residents near the community center entrance. The first phase of the counteroffensive had succeeded. Barbara's mask had been publicly removed, and multiple independent investigations were now in motion. But I knew from experience that cornered adversaries were often the most dangerous. As I drove home to Emma, I remained vigilant, knowing that Barbara's network of influence might still try to retaliate before her world completely unraveled. The investigations into Barbara Winters expanded like ripples in a pond. What began as a case of targeted harassment against my family soon revealed a complex web of corruption extending throughout the HOA's operations. The local police investigation into the wheelchair tampering triggered a forensic audit of the HOA finances, which uncovered years of misappropriated funds. She skimmed nearly $173,000 from the reserve account through fraudulent landscaping contracts, the forensic accountant explained during a special board meeting. The companies listed as service providers either do not exist or are owned by her brother-in-law. Within 2 weeks, Barbara faced multiple criminal charges: assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment of a minor, fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy. Her husband's construction company came under scrutiny when investigators discovered connections between HOA contracts and city building permits fast-tracked through his political connections. I worked with a specialized attorney who focused on disability rights violations. "What happened to your daughter represents an egregious violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act," she explained as we prepared our civil case. "The HOA has a legal obligation to provide reasonable accommodations, not actively sabotage them." Emma's recovery progressed steadily. The physical injuries healed faster than the psychological ones. She initially refused to use her wheelchair outside the house, fearful of another accident. We worked with a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery, and gradually, Emma's confidence returned. "Would you be willing to tell your story to the investigators?" I asked her one evening as we practiced wheelchair maneuvers in the backyard. "Only if you feel comfortable." Emma considered the question with the seriousness that had always characterized her approach to difficult situations. Will it help make sure she cannot hurt anyone else? Yes, I answered truthfully. Your testimony would be very powerful. The prosecutor's office created a comfortable environment for Emma's recorded statement. She spoke with remarkable clarity about her experience, describing not just the physical accident, but the months of feeling watched and targeted in her own neighborhood. The worst part was not the fall, she explained, her voice steady despite the difficult subject. It was knowing someone wanted to hurt me just because I needed a ramp to get into my own house. Like I did not deserve to live there because my legs do not work like everyone else's. The video of her testimony was played during Barbara's bail hearing. The judge, visibly moved, denied bail, citing clear and present danger to the community, particularly its most vulnerable members. The HOA board underwent complete restructuring. The treasurer, in exchange for leniency regarding his complicity in the financial irregularities, provided extensive documentation of Barbara's systematic targeting of residents who challenged her authority. An interim board was elected, with James Okada serving as president. Our first order of business is to completely rewrite the HOA bylaws, he announced at the emergency community meeting. We need clear protections against discrimination and transparent financial controls. Media coverage expanded from local to national news. Our story became a focal point in discussions about HOA overreach and disability rights. I declined most interview requests, focusing instead on Emma's recovery and working with investigators to build airtight cases. Barbara's defense strategy shifted from denial to deflection. Her attorney attempted to portray her as a dedicated community servant who had been framed by resentful residents. This approach collapsed when 3 former HOA office employees came forward with documented evidence of her instructing them to target specific homeowners with violations. She kept a list, Melissa testified during the preliminary hearing. She called it her problem properties list. Any home with residents who questioned her decisions or requested accommodations automatically received increased scrutiny and violations. The financial investigation expanded to include Barbara's previous HOA position in another state, revealing a pattern of similar behavior stretching back nearly a decade. Former residents from that community came forward with stories matching our experience. Donald Winters filed for divorce 3 weeks after Barbara's arrest, attempting to distance himself from the expanding investigation into his business practices. The construction company's records were seized after evidence emerged of systematic building code violations and permit fraud. Throughout this process, our neighborhood began to heal. Residents who had previously avoided eye contact now gathered for community meetings. The atmosphere of fear dissipated, replaced by a collective determination to rebuild their community on principles of inclusion and transparency. Emma noticed the change during her physical therapy walks around the neighborhood. People wave now, she observed, and Mrs. Cohen asked if I would help with her garden design since I can see things from a different perspective in my wheelchair. The preliminary hearing for Barbara's criminal case was scheduled for early fall. The prosecuting attorney informed me that based on the mountain of evidence, they expected the case to result in a plea deal rather than proceed to trial. She is facing serious prison time, he explained. Her attorneys know it would be strategic to cooperate at this point. As summer transitioned to autumn, the neighborhood organized a community accessibility project. Volunteers helped install ramps at the homes of elderly residents, widened garden paths in the community areas, and created a fully accessible playground in the park. Emma attended the playground opening ceremony, cutting the ribbon from her wheelchair while neighbors applauded. The fear that had shadowed her face for months had finally lifted. Justice was not just a legal concept unfolding in courtrooms, it was taking physical shape in our transformed community. The courthouse stood imposing against the clear November sky as Barbara Winters entered her final plea. The prosecution had assembled such overwhelming evidence that her attorneys negotiated a deal, guilty pleas to all major charges in exchange for concurrent rather than consecutive sentences. 8 years in state prison, no possibility of parole for at least 5, and full restitution to the HOA and victims. I sat in the courtroom with Emma beside me in her wheelchair, now decorated with colorful spoke guards designed by her new friends in the neighborhood. We listened as the judge addressed Barbara directly. "Your actions represent an extraordinary abuse of power, targeting the most vulnerable members of your community for personal gain and control," the judge stated, her voice firm with controlled outrage. "The court finds particularly disturbing your willful targeting of a disabled child, an act that demonstrates a profound moral failure." Barbara did ends. Look at us as deputies led her away. Her shoulders, once squared with arrogance, now slumped in defeat. The empire she had built through intimidation and manipulation had crumbled completely. Her ex-husband awaited his own trial for related financial crimes. The construction company had declared bankruptcy, with multiple civil suits pending from homeowners with defective construction. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered for statements. I declined interviews, but Emma surprised me by speaking up. "I just want other kids like me to know they belong in any neighborhood," she said clearly into the microphones. "Needing a wheelchair or a ramp does not make you less important." Winter brought physical changes to Maple Creek Estates. The new HOA board, led by James Okada, implemented a community-wide accessibility initiative. Sidewalk curb cuts appeared at every intersection. The community center received a complete renovation to ensure full accessibility. Most symbolically, the HOA guidelines were rewritten to specifically protect reasonable accommodations for residents with disabilities. Our home transformed as well. The makeshift war room returned to being a family office. The security system remained, but its purpose shifted from gathering evidence to providing peace of mind. Emma's therapy progressed to the point where she began participating in a wheelchair basketball program at the renovated community center. Spring arrived with unexpected news. The Department of Justice used our case as the foundation for a nationwide initiative to address discriminatory practices in homeowners associations. I was asked to consult on training materials for investigators. Emma was invited to speak at a youth leadership conference about advocacy and inclusion. "Do you miss it, Dad?" Emma asked one evening as we sat on our front porch, watching neighbors walk past. Many waved or stopped to chat briefly. "Miss what, sweetheart?" "Being an FBI agent, solving big cases, being important." I considered her question carefully. What happened here was as important as any case I worked overseas. Maybe more so because it was about protecting our home. But no, I do not miss the old life. The neighborhood summer festival marked 1 year since we had moved to Maple Creek. Emma volunteered at the accessibility information booth, helping elderly residents learn about home modification resources. I assisted with security, old habits finding new positive outlets. From my position near the community center entrance, I could see the changes a year had brought. Ramps and accessible paths had been integrated so naturally they seemed like original features. Residents who had once lived in isolation now chatted in groups, sharing food and stories. The invisible barriers that had separated people under Barbara's reign